Oh, I think we are live. I always say think because there's always something. And today, Jen, I am so excited to have you. Give us 30 seconds on who you are and what you do, and then I'll sing you more praises when you're done.
Oh my gosh. All right. I'm Jen Lenander. I'm Senior Director and Chief of Staff at Elastic. I've been here for about 2.5 years. I like to call myself a fake lawyer. I did go to law school, but I never got licensed, and I think it was the best thing that I ever could have done. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
All right, so we're gonna have to pause for a second on the whole. I went to law school and I didn't get licensed. So there's so much to talk about. As always, I know this half hour will simply not be enough. Yeah. But I do want to ask about that. That's just kind of cool. That was clearly not on whatever formal agenda we had, which was none. But I want to talk about that for a second because there's this cool kind of also startup called Ex Judicata, and I just came to mind. I'm really kind of interested in them, and I watch them closely, and I'm kind of connected to them, and their entire mission. Cool name, by the way, Ex Judicata, not Lex. See what they did there? But it's all about the JD graduates who at some point, it could be right after graduation, or it could be, as we know and we see all the time, 5, 10, 20 years after practicing law, people shift. So you went to law school, you got the JD. Did you take a bar exam?
Nope.
No, okay. So you really just like, I'm done. That was a good degree. What am I going to do with it? So what did you do? Give me a little career journey. I actually don't know.
Yeah. So I went to law school as a non-traditional student. So after undergrad, I worked for about 5 years. I knew I wasn't ready for that, like emotionally, professionally, whatever it was. And so I took time to just get some professional experience. And so I went to law school at night and I worked full time through the day, which I don't recommend. That was crazy looking back on it. So when I started law school, I was the program and operations manager for the Institute for Health Informatics at the University of Minnesota. And so I had already started my operations journey. And so probably about 1.5 years into law school, I knew I wasn't going to practice, mainly because my operations brain was much stronger than my legal brain. But at that time, I had invested quite an amount of money and it felt dumb to like drop out of law school. And so I was like, I'm going to finish this because then I'll have this legal brain. And I knew that there would be some just appreciation if I went into a legal operations role that would come with having a law degree and matriculating through the schooling and understanding the aspects of the law without ever practicing. And so when I finished law school, I was the department administrator and chief of staff for the Department of Ophthalmology and Visual Neurosciences at the U. So I had progressively moved up while I was in law school while working. And then I was like, okay, now let's use my legal brain. And so I moved to a firm to do operations work. And spent 8 years
inside a law firm.
And then moved in-house about 4 years ago.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's super cool. So you knew you kind of thought of legal ops while you were in law school because of your.
Because back then, so I started law school in I think 2009. LPM was a big thing, right? Legal project management. And so I had done a lot of research on that while I was in law school and thought that would be the direction that I would head. But a lot of firms that were hiring specifically for LPM wanted you to have litigation experience, which I thought was a joke, but I was like, okay, fine. So I went more into like the administrator role, operations role in a firm, which was a great fit for me. And then really kind of figured out like, I'm really good at automation. I'm really good at looking at processes and really hone those skills in the firm setting in somewhat of a non-traditional way in the firm too, because that wasn't a big thing 10 years ago, right? And really like made a name for myself and really figured out how to do that and learn tech enough that I could just do the work myself, right? And so I was adding value without having to bring a developer in, things like that.
Okay. Knowing tech enough that you could do it yourself, that makes you a bit of a unicorn for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you and I, we were just talking about one of my favorite topics and acronyms, FOMO. When we talk about, you just said tech. We've managed to go 4 minutes without saying that the 2-letter monster that everybody talks about at every moment they have. So let's talk about AI. Let's talk about tech. But my favorite acronym related to that, FOMO.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what what FOMO, you mentioned that you had to kind of get over, you had some FOMO and you had to actively think about it. Now, I don't know if it was even in the tech context or not, but
Yeah.
I certainly feel it. I feel it from our client. I feel it everywhere. So what do you?
Yeah, I think for FOMO for me, it's when I look at LinkedIn, right? That's a daily scroll of what's going on. There's a lot of people posting about what they're doing with tech or what their ideas are. And for a while, I felt the need to keep up, right? To post myself and like
Yeah.
what can I post that's original. And that was really stressful, right? And so it's like I don't need to outwardly talk about this necessarily all the time. Like, what am I doing for myself and for my company? And that's enough, right? But it took a while. Like there was a lot of like, am I good enough if I'm not posting on LinkedIn every day or every week?
Yes, so I love this. Can
Right?
let's draw an analogy to just look. It's 2025. I've been around the block enough that I'm going, oh my God, what is this social media thing that's just like just thrown itself into every aspect of my life, business and personal. So
Yeah.
we've got the new generation, right? Kids, and we know that they're born into this age, they live in this age. We are watching the impacts that it's having on their mental health, and
Mhm.
it's scary, and that's enough to deal with. But now we're seeing it seep into our professional lives, and we're like,
Yeah.
wow, it's actually causing also people to feel things. You're like, this is social media. I've got a day job. I'm good at what I do. Why are these two suddenly interacting? And they are.
Yeah.
And for some, social media really has been the platform to evolve in their profession
Yeah.
in a way that probably they wouldn't have before. And that's not a ding against them at all. That's just, it's giving a platform for people
Yep.
who can benefit from it. But I think this platform is also causing other people who actually don't need it to feel like they need it. Does
Yeah.
everybody need to be active on LinkedIn? Is really maybe the question for you.
Yeah. I don't think so. I mean, I think if you enjoy that and that brings you joy and you get great value out of it, absolutely, right? But if it's just causing you stress, and you're trying to come up with just anything to say just to
Right?
say it, like then don't, right? Like I think
Yeah.
it's the same advice that I give my team as, I develop them professionally. Like you can sit on a meeting and not say anything. Like don't speak up unless you have value to add to that conversation, right?
Yeah.
I think about the same thing with LinkedIn. Like, am I adding value or am I just commenting to comment so that somebody may see me so that when I maybe want to go get another job, somebody sees that I am smart or like
Yeah.
what's the
Why
purpose,
are you doing it? Exactly?
right?
Exactly. And I think you're exactly right. I think there's, which brings us of course to like, what is the content quality crapometer that is happening on LinkedIn? Not to mention the algorithm that everybody thinks they figured out, and then you're like, what? Why is there no clear way to use this thing, right? At least before there were newspapers, you write an article, there's a circulation, it goes to some number of people. If they turn to that page, they'll see the article. I
Yeah.
think this is like total chaos. And there's some winners where you're like, oh, what is even the metric for winning? Is it the number? Is it the number of views, the likes, the this? Or are you actually seeing people, like you said, wow, they got another job thanks to their presence on LinkedIn and their content.
Right.
I'm just seeing a lot of junk. And of course, there's the debate of whether you use AI to write content, is AI writing. I just kind of feel like this becomes a fully consuming, obsessive world to live in where you're like, hey, if you've got a day job, you probably shouldn't be spending that many hours on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I agree, and because I think it also creates imposter syndrome for people because there's I think and then there's a lot of posts that are built with AI, which is
Of
fine.
course. Yeah.
But I also think LinkedIn sometimes reminds me of Facebook, right? The
Yeah.
couples that you see posting on Facebook about how happy their marriage
Happy
is
anniversary, dear.
thank you, is a facade, right?
How come you
Sometimes,
don't do that? Please, you don't. You obviously do that. I'm sorry to those who are going to hear this, but like I never understood that.
right?
Right? What is that? Hello, world. Happy anniversary, Pookums. Love you, Schmookums. What is that?
Right?
I'm sorry. This probably isn't going to be popular, but
Yeah, but I think some of that's not the same on LinkedIn, right? And not that it's bad or like, but I think if we're not self-aware enough to look at that and reflect and be like, okay, I don't need to do that, or I don't even need to read that, or even take that into like my worldview.
yeah,
Not everyone can do that, right? And I think that's what creates this imposter syndrome and this fear of missing out.
yeah,
And I think that can be dangerous for professionals who are maybe a little earlier in their career and trying to figure out what is my strategic path? And they're seeing so many different things. And then there's this like spinning of where do I go? And because everything that's out there is not the right thing for you, right? Just because it worked for this company doesn't mean it's going to work for your company or your situation. And so I think it's fine. You have to learn how to read through the BS though, right?
You have to, yes. And some of it's intentional BS. This was another interesting thing I've discovered where, again, I'm such a open book that I'm like, what, people do that? Right? So I'm watching people on LinkedIn. I'm like, man, that's wow. And somebody else is like, that's not really who they are. They do it because they're trying to get the attention for whatever intentional purpose they have, which is fine. Hey, the Kardashians became famous. And I'm like, there you go. Okay. But anyway, let's shift to things that have to do with actually like our day jobs, because I don't think either one of us is paid to hang out on LinkedIn, although technically I suppose I maybe am or should be. I'm gonna just do this though. I'm like, forget the posting. I'm just gonna do this little weekly talk show, and that's gonna float my boat. So yes, thank you for joining what I continue to call an experiment. But let's shift to contracts for a minute, because that is why, if anybody is going to be listening, that would be hopefully what they're listening for, because you're doing some really, really cool things. By the way, the beauty of running this thing is I get to pick and choose who joins me. And I love having people that I like, because guess what? That's how I get to do this thing. So you're amazing. Everything we watch you do, everything about your approach, you are the real deal. And I'm just going to say it because you are, and it's hard to be the real deal. I will add that it is hard to be the real deal. If you're not going to play in the BS game, and you're not going to be overwhelmed by FOMO, you're not going to be pushed to do things aren't good for the business, but oh well, the pressures, I'll just do it. You made a really tough decision to pause a CLM system implementation and rethink things.
Yeah.
I love that story. I've asked you to tell it before. I'll ask you every time, because people need to be empowered to stop and ask and maybe redo things. So tell us a little bit about that.
So when I came into my role here at Elastic, we were in the middle of implementing a CLM. It had been going on for about 2+ years. And really,
just pause on that for a second.
I know.
You were in the middle of a CLM system implementation that was already in progress for 2+ years. Yeah. Everybody just let that sink in. And Jen swoops in and says what and does what?
Yeah, I mean, my first thing is to listen, right? Like what's going on and observe. And about 6 months in, it just wasn't going anywhere, right? And I don't think that it was going to be successful. And I recognized that. And so I made the really hard decision to propose to my CLO that we kill it. And it was hard, right? As I draft my business case of why we should kill it, I was also updating my resume on my personal computer, because it was a risk to take. But obviously I did that. I weighed the pros and cons of it and understood what my relationship was with my CLO. And I felt like that she trusted me, that this would be an okay thing for me to do. But it was a risk, and I knew that going in. But I was very lucky. She supported me. Not immediately, right? We had a lot of discussions about it, and she really asked me a lot of hard-hitting questions about why I thought this. And, it really comes down to, I think, the core of legal ops, which is people, process, technology, right? And so what Elastic had done was chosen a tool to fix the process. And that's backwards, right? That's technology, process, people. We didn't know our process. We didn't know what it was or how to streamline it before we went to technology. Yeah. And so my recommendation was to kill it completely, to take a step back and to really look at our end-to-end quote to cash process, because that was my question when I came in. What is our quote to cash process? And nobody could really articulate that to me. And there was no documentation around it, which was really frustrating as somebody who was new to this org, somewhat new to the revenue generating side of a company. And so we paused. We brought InnoLaw in to help us do. We interviewed 20+ different practice groups or stakeholder groups throughout the company to really understand that, and then did this gap analysis to figure, okay, what are we doing? How do we rethink this? And then we did that analysis, and then we put together a plan of how we wanted to approach this. And
So
that's,
you stopped, you paused, so you what is it, slow down to go faster.
slow down to go fast. Absolutely.
So you definitely had to do that.
Mhm.
And that was hard. And again, everybody has to understand that that is hard and that takes guts. It's not just hard work, because there could be a lot of good hard workers there, but it takes guts to make that, to even bring that up to your CLO. So amazing story there. And it only gets better in my mind because you do get to now go fast. Because from what I know you're doing, I'd love for you to share how you are tackling bits and pieces so that there isn't FOMO. You're not missing out on tech. You're not making progress with tech because Jen said, we really need to understand every nuance of our process. We need to revise it, but we need to do all this stuff before we touch tech, which, look, I've been doing the people process before tech mantra as long as I can remember. The reality is, especially now, because you don't have to invest in the end-to-end CLM system as the only thing you're doing, you get to dabble in other tech stuff. So everybody's scratching their tech itch. They're not having FOMO, but you also know that the big picture of the processes are being redefined. So tell us a little bit about how you are experimenting with tech and obviously AI right now, like hands-on, boots on the ground stuff.
Yeah. So when I think about CLM, right, it's contract lifecycle management, that is your process, right? That is not your tool necessarily. And I know we've talked about this. And so when I think about the CLM process, in the most simplest of terms, it is intake, it is review / redlining, and it is repository, right? Those are three different things. And when I look at tools or systems, I don't think that there's anything out there that does all parts of that really well.
Equally well.
And in some ways, Lucy, they shouldn't, because when they get funding from their investors, they have to probably choose where they're putting that funding. And they can't put it across all three, because then they can't invest in any one of those well, right? And so my approach to this is to think about point solutions, right? Just think about those three things as separate processes. And what is the right tool for my intake? What is the right tool for my review redlining? And what is the right tool for my repository? And the beauty of tech today is APIs are super easy to connect together. And so I can still have an end-to-end process, but I can have different tools, point solutions that allow me to build an end-to-end process without investing millions of dollars into one tool. And the beauty of that too is, if in 2 years I decide that my intake is not working for me anymore, I can rip and replace really easily without impacting everything.
Yeah, that's a super important point. The stickiness of these tools and the ability to be agile and switch in and out. This isn't an SAP implementation. It shouldn't feel like it, and yet we're seeing that feeling. Yeah. So what are you doing with intake, with red? Like what how far along are you in each of those buckets?
So we chose, I don't want to necessarily talk about tools, but so we chose an intake tool that is no code, right? That we can build ourselves. That was really important for me, for somebody who had built a lot of tech myself. I taught myself Smartsheet, and that kind of like showed me the world of like, I can do this. I don't need to be a developer or a coder. And so finding something that we could use that was context rich, because I feel legal is very context rich versus other like intake tools that are more
in out, binary. Yeah,
exactly. So we chose a intake tool that is, I felt, context rich, that my team can build on its own. And so if there's changes, we can go on the back end and change it and build it in a dev environment before we push to prod. So we're building self-serve NDA. We roll out, I think, in 2.5 weeks. We just finished UAT this week. It went beautifully. We are looking at our partner agreement process next. We'll probably be able to build out that process within 3 months, if that. And we're integrating it all. So I have a very strong sales team, but they live in Salesforce. And so I want to meet them where they are. And so they initiate the process in Salesforce. When it comes to legal in our intake tool. It syncs back to Salesforce. So if my sales team wants to know what the status is, they don't have to log into my intake tool. They can see it. We're pushing back the status back to Salesforce. But my intake tool is my single source of truth for where my contracts are as far as process wise. And then I have a redlining tool that I've purchased that is a Word add-in. And so it doesn't need to be integrated actually with anything because it's just a Word add. So when I open in my intake tool, it opens in Word. My redlining is there, and that's all synced. Repository is our next step. We haven't gotten there yet. We're looking. I've seen some really cool standalone repositories that I'm really excited about.
Okay.
And I think, the key for me is, is it easy to use? Does it have a good pricing model? Because I do want to be able to deploy my repository to my sales team because I want them to be able to AI search, like when is this up for renewal, or can my customer do XYZ? Do I have logo rights to this? And can my marketing team use that repository? Can my finance team use that repository for SOX compliance? And so I think this is where, like, if we go back to people, process, technology, what is my BRD around my repository? What is my BRD around my redlining? What was my BRD around my intake? And so instead of having to do one BRD across all three by doing point solutions, I get to be really specific about each of those point solutions, which I think allows for a better fit for purpose for me and my use case versus whatever else is out there.
100%. The specificity of the BRD will make or break the technology experience, because from the very beginning, if you're not clear on what you want, you shouldn't go shopping. And that's again, we see that all the time where the BRDs are very high level. I wanted to, and it is everything. It's like offering a buffet. That specificity it's painstakingly important, and I think that's part of why people kind of rush through it. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, how do you think about the internal resources you need to manage? So you've made a really good point, by the way, about tech being, no code, something we can do ourselves. You are on the tech savvy side, even for legal operations professionals, I would say you are on the tech savvy side, because legal ops kind of grows from either practicing law, finance and business ops, or tech. And those, like the tech PMs, they do great, but you're on the tech savvy side. So you said something though very important about being able to do it yourselves. So you've got these solutions you're going to piece together in some ways and put them together. Who's going to manage and oversee that in your team? What kind of resources?
Yeah, so I have a team of 3 right now. I break it up really. I have a data analyst. I have somebody who focuses more on outside counsel management, and then I have somebody who's more focused on tech. But when it comes to like my integrations, that's where my IT comes in, right? I think this is where having really strong partners within the company is so important, right? And I think you've met my IT team, but they are probably the people I talk to the most outside of my individual team, right? And one is bringing them along on the journey, helping them understand the value proposition of what I'm doing, helping them understand the time savings that it's going to bring to their team, because I'm not going to be coming to them every time I need an update in Salesforce, right? If I don't need to do this in the CRM and I can pull it into my team, they're more interested in helping me build those integrations now, because hopefully I won't have to really do as much updates, or I won't come and say, I need this done in the next 48 hours, right? Which one isn't going to happen. And 2, it doesn't give them that stress. So I think, throughout the whole thing though, I think it's really important that you have good relationships with your stakeholders. Sales, deal desk, legal, obviously, but your IT, even your finance team, right? Because there are some times where finance needs to get involved in an approval in an agreement. And so why don't you build that into your workflow at the beginning instead of saying, oh, we're going to manually email them? Well, now you've broken that process, right? And so what are their requirements also? This was part of like the end-to-end understanding of quote to cash, to know who your stakeholders are and where they come into the process, so that you know where to include them and where not to.
And you know what, that also is a good note that, look, not every enterprise is structured the same, not every legal team, not every ops function. And so that's the beauty of, there is not one answer. There is not one implementation playbook for a CLM system, not at all. And when we talk about even point solutions, we're like, okay, that requires a different type of model for who are the people you have, what's the relationship with IT. The low code or no code is great, but then because they're oftentimes telling us, well, we don't really have IT support, I'm like, okay, great, the no code, low code will help you for that point solution, but it's going to live on its own. The integrations then aren't going to be there because you don't have IT support, and that might also be okay. There's no good or not good. I mean, the not good is not being able to tell me how your process works. Like that is not good. And you identified that very clearly. what I'm hearing though is still like, look, you don't have to have the perfect processes. You don't have to have it all cleaned up and tidy before you explore tech, but you do need to at least know the current state of the process so that you, and I'm amazed at how kind of people yawn and roll their eyes. I say, I'm like, but you cannot, you just can't. I don't know how else. And I always feel like, how blunt can we be to just say it will fail if you don't know how things work today? But they're like, no, if I get the right tech, can't it tell us how to do things? You know, what won't it tell us things?
No, and you really want your process to determine what tech you buy, right? And I think this is also where, I think it's great to know what other people are using for tech and CLM, and that's why I'm not trying to be shady. I'm just not saying because what works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else's company, right? And so I always see when people say on other sites like, what do you use for CLM, or what do you use for this? Like, right. What are your business requirements? Like, if you want to look at somebody's BRD to like get an idea of what that should look like, absolutely, right? But don't ask what people are using for tech because it won't be fit for you.
Yes.
Right?
That's such an important note. I mean, because look, everybody is sharing. Everybody needs to know what's working well, what isn't working well. Posting on LinkedIn, what do you use, and getting a slew of names, and you're going to go and do 50 demos because now you have a list of names. That is not a selection process. That's not healthy.
And a demo can look beautiful, but you put it into your process and your environment, and it's going to fail. Like, I mean, not always, but it could, right?
That's right. So I think what you're saying, I don't think what you're saying, because I know you're very active in the legal ops community. You're not saying don't share experiences.
No.
You're saying make it qualitative. If you're going to share an experience, have a conversation with the other person that you trust, their opinion, and say, okay, so you picked these 3 systems to work this way together. What was that like? What's it like working with them? How was their sales team? What is their success plan? How do they do the implementation? Right? I think I'm trying to lead the witness because I know how careful you are about this stuff. And I think they're like, yes, good. I'm in the legal ops community now. I want to know what they all use. And I'm going to say, honestly, we saw the kind of the rise of that mode happen. Certainly right after COVID, there were a couple of CLM providers, especially, that did really well in marketing. And they were really good and actually geographically certain parts of the country. And that everybody was there was a copy and paste approach to it. And we see it. I'm from the outside. I'm going, let me guess. If you have this tool and you have that tool for this, you probably have this for spend management. You probably are doing this, but for knowledge management. And then you're probably going to be there for about 18 months. And I'm going to see you copy and replace the same thing, not replace, repeat at another company. Yeah. There's a bit of a phenomenon that happened there. It feels like people are slowing down and being a little bit more mindful. Yep. We have a couple of minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about that legal ops community then. And, yep. How do you leverage it? How do you contribute? What are some tips for people who are trying to figure out what to do next in legal ops?
I mean, I think the beauty of legal ops is there is a true community, right? And people do want to help each other. And I think there's so many strategic plays that you can make personally, professionally around it, right? As far as like looking for your next role, but also like I think about it from a leader standpoint of trying to identify who's my next teammate, and really like learning who really is interested in learning and in being creative and thinking outside the box. I think that's one thing that when I look at Clock and when I look at ACC or other orgs that I belong to, is who are those people? That's important to me because it just names stick out. But again, this is the same as LinkedIn. Like I only respond to things where I feel like I can truly give value and where I'm trying to throw my bias out, right? If I'm biased towards something, I want to be able to recognize that and then either caveat that, right? My bias is this, but I think this is a great tool or whatever, but I'm on their XYZ board. And so I want to, make sure I'm transparent about that. But I think it's really powerful to just belong to a community. I was in San Francisco a week ago and I met somebody through a legal ops thing, and I just took an hour out and we went and had a conversation in a patio. We didn't drink anything. We literally just sat there and talked about all of the things going on. And that hour was brilliant. Like it was so worth it. We met each other via a community one time, and just we connected and now we're setting up monthly calls. And I think that's really powerful because I think sharing both your wins and your losses and being open about that is really powerful, because let's not repeat what everyone else has done. Let's learn from each other, which I think is really important. I want to say one other thing about vendors, just because I think it's something that's really important. I don't think everyone does that. I don't know if it's a cheat code or whatever, but I really think it's important when you are looking at vendors for tools that you create an actual relationship with them. It is not just a contract. It is a relationship because one, I want to tell them when they're not doing good or when they're not showing up the way that I want them to. And I want them to tell me the same. Like they're in many ways the subject matter expert when it comes to XYZ because that's their tool. And they've done this with 100+ other customers. And so if I'm building out a process and they're like, I don't think that's best practice, or they've seen this and they think it's a red flag, I don't want them to talk about that internally within their company. I want them to come to me and say, hey, Jen, like,
Yeah.
I love you and all the things that you're doing, but I don't think this is the right way. XYZ companies have done it this way. And you don't get that unless you build a relationship, right? You have to build that trust. And I think that's so important with any tech, but CLM especially, because these vendors have seen it all. And so you want them to tell you when you're maybe going down the wrong path and to feel comfortable doing that and to have built that relationship where they can do that. And the vendors that I have on board, I have most of the CEOs' cell phone numbers that I could call and say, hey, I'm struggling with XYZ, and they can do the same to me, or the AE, or my architect, whatever it is. And there is more value than that I think we give credit to.
That is a very important note. And I hate that we're out of time. Of course, we're going to do a second set version, what's it called? A follow on this, because there's so much to unpack there. There's so much, but I'm gonna keep us on time. I'm supposed to do that. Wow, but that was really important. We'll dig into that in another episode. I promise. Jen, thank you so much. Mm-hmm. Everything you're saying is because look, it's the real deal. It's authenticity. Wade through the BS. That's the only way to succeed. I think I'm going to summarize. Jen's like, you got to do the work. You got to do the work. You got to learn. You got to be curious. You got to spend the time. This isn't easy, and you have to really be all in on it. So thank you so much. Always a pleasure to see you. Thanks everybody. More to come. Stay tuned.